All right, so these are the stamp sets. These are the 7 new sets with Stampers Anonymous for 2024. Everyday Part 2 is really what we're calling it because it is the Everyday collection. There's a lot of great imagery, everything from alphabets to a lot of botanicals to some cool kind of industrial elements, and then we'll talk about my favorite, which is Hodgepodge, because, well, I just love it. Okay. So when it comes to stamps, I always preface this by saying that I license my art. I am not an illustrator. I cannot draw, but I can see art that I love, and often I can use it as is. Some of it I manipulate it very, very much. So I love the fact that in this creative space, there are people that love to draw and illustrate and license that work, and then there's people like me that see those drawings and have product ideas of how we can turn it into product, because sometimes imagery is used on packaging and clothing and home decor, and in my world, it translates into stamps. So for this release, I'll just kind of stack these up and we'll bring in one at a time. We'll talk about Sign Painter. This is CMS 484. Now, Sign Painter was really inspired by paint by numbers that we did on the last release this year, which were those big kind of brushstroke numbers. And I loved the brush of this one. So again, this isn't like a digital font. This is somebody that just went in and literally painted an alphabet and numbers. And I really loved this set. I wanted to do an alphabet with this, and I always love when Stampers Anonymous lets me do alphabets because it is a lot of work to produce and get the dies made. Typically, you'll see on stamp sets like this that have a lot of images, they come with the full sheet of rubber already on the set. You can leave it like that if you want. A lot of people just leave the whole rubber sheet on there. They are die cut. Or you can do what I do, which is called weeding, where you like take the whole sheet of rubber and you kind of pull off that excess and you leave the stamps in place. It's really a personal preference. Some people like the fact that they can pop out a stamp and plug it right back in where it goes. And other people like me, because it doesn't really matter. I like to just use my stamps. I just pull them off. I like it that way. It makes the set lighter for me too. So this particular paint by number, and you'll see from the makes a little bit more, it is a brushstroke alphabet. It also has some numbers, a little bit of punctuation, and then this one right here. This particular stamp, the reason I wanted to do it is for a couple of reasons. One, you can use it as an underline, right? If you wanted to just stamp that and actually use it to stamp a word going across a card. But because it is a cool, really thin brushstroke on both edges, you can take this and imagine if this was a piece of cardstock, you can stamp this off the edge of the cardstock all the way around, and it will look like you kind of swiped paint or an ink pad along the edges. So you can use it in its entirety, but you can also use just half of it to kind of create that wispy brushstroke across the edge. So I do like that. I don't do a lot of alphabet to numbers, but this one was really good. It is smaller than paint by number. Those numbers were huge. But this is, you'll see for the cards, it's a great size for cards and journals and that type of thing. So that is Sign Painter. The next one, we do have a lot of botanicals. This is CMS 485. This is called Floristry. Floristry, like forestry. It's a beautiful stamp of a lot of very cool botanicals, but I loved the illustration that this artist did. It's almost like a lino cut or a wood carve. You can see from just the detail in that etched rubber that Stampers Anonymous does so beautifully, that it has some really great bold definition, and this makes it ideal for coloring. But the beauty of this, the fact that when it comes to coloring, is that you don't lose the detail because of the crispness of this design. This set also comes with its own grid block. It's actually part of the set, so it is included in the set when you get it. Because it's a weird size stamp, I just felt that sometimes, you know, if it's really weird that wouldn't have a standard block, that it is nice that Stampers Anonymous also does the grid blocks, and they include that. So this one you're going to see you can use in its entirety, but it's also meant for parts and pieces. And then of course I just wanted to do a really nice classic font that goes with it, so you can do cards for birthdays or thanks or friends or congrats or all types of things. So it is a beautiful, beautiful set, great for coloring. Again, you'll see that in the makes. Another botanical, and this was inspired by Paula. Paula really wanted this. She's asked me for a stamp set like this for quite a while. She loves like the vintage embroidery patterns, and that's exactly where this came from. This is scanned from vintage embroidery patterns. And it's really just the simplicity of the lines. So it does have a great definition, a great detail. This can be used as an outline. It can be used as a resist, but it can also be used just to color in, kind of like a coloring book. It's really beautiful. It does have some great little numbers featured in there because, of course, you know, the patterns have little numbers. So this one is CMS 486 embroidery. And when you see this, I mean, what I love, again, about the makes is that often you'll see imagery and it looks so basic. But then when you see the makes, you're like, wow, I can't believe like an image like this can create that. So you'll see, it is a really pretty set. This next one, this was a must-have in our world, especially if you're a fan of ideology. This is called French Garden. This is CMS 487. And CMS, cling-mounted set, that's the whole CMS, and we number them so they're easy to identify. This one has some really beautiful botanicals. It also has this great little handwriting, this little script, this little number box, and then this little Paris. I love the typography and the number. The reason this set is so important to ideology lovers is that if you remember this SKU, the collage paper, a very, very popular one, this is actually being retired, this collage paper. And these images were so loved by so many makers that when I found out this was going away, I'm like, okay, well, then we need to take the imagery from this, the leaves, the flowers, the berries, all of that, and we need to still keep it going because Stampers Anonymous doesn't retire things. So that, if this looks familiar, that's really where we did. We did scale it down a little bit, and we actually included the whole graphic where a lot of this is kind of cut off the edge of the collage paper. So now you can take these images and make your own collage paper. You can stamp it on blank paper. You can stamp it directly onto the surface. But so if you're a fan of this, I recommend stocking up because it is going away. But if you don't, fear not, because this stamp set will be around, and it's really just a beautiful engraved images. These are actually vintage images, and I love the detail of it. I love the fade, the sketchy line, and all of these florals. I mean, I know you're like, well, floral, 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 but they all have a different aesthetic to them, right? Whether kind of a wood carved lino cut or that old school outline or that engraving design. So really pretty. So French Garden, a must. We needed to have it. Then we're going to talk about Tidbits. Now, give you a little backstory in Stampers Anonymous. Like, I've designed stamps with Ted and Stampers Anonymous for, I don't even know how many years now. It's a lot, but obviously 488 sets worth. And if you've been around since the beginning, you know that the stamp set started with like maybe 3 or 4 images, just because honestly, cling-mounted rubber was very new in the industry when I started doing that with Stampers Anonymous. It was always woodblock stamps. That's how I started, was designing woodblock. And as we transitioned into this kind of cling mount, we were really finding our way. We used to have them on white sheets. In fact, the first 100 sets are still on the white storage sheet, and then we went to clear after that. The first 100 are not indexed, meaning they don't have the image stamped. You know, obviously technology allowed that to evolve. And Stampers is very old school, so we kind of kept the original 100 the way they are. But these, as we went through, I keep trying to add more and more images to a set. And that's where I said, like, Ted said about 18 years. Wow, time flies. But I love the fact that I ask, hey, can we do this? And really, the guy never says no. He's like, if that's what you want, we will make it happen. And so really, thank you, Ted, and the whole team. I mean, when you see how these are actually made, I mean, it's hand pressed, hand indexed, so that means they're stamped on there, and then die cut, and then someone has to take it out of the die and then put it onto this sheet. I mean, there's so much hand touching of a stamp set. So when you do something like this, like Tidbits, it really is complex, even though it seems like, oh, it's just a basic sheet of rubber. No, these are probably some of the most complicated because all of these stamps are individually cut. Now, you'll see in some of the makes that many makers use this as a background stamp. Even though these are individual, you could just ink this and treat it like a background stamp. You can leave it right here on the mount. But this was really inspired by kind of the evolution of me pushing my luck for these different stamp sets. Okay, it really started with this one. This was 396. This is Field Notes, and this was the first time that we put a lot of different images on there. This one has 35 different images, and I remember when I first showed it, Ted's like, oh, 35 images, and I'm like, we can do this.
Just how he sounds.
He does, yeah. You can just tell, like it's the shock, and then he listens, but. It has, I kind of spaced it. I'm like, oh, don't worry, we can still get a die in there. And okay, great set because it has so many cool details. This, of course, was inspired when we did a lot of field notes in ideology. Then, as we move forward, that was 396, and we got to 448. This was eccentric you can see I started to kind of push my luck. I'm like, oh, okay, this one has 44 images. Now we went from 35 to 44. This, again, another favorite, makes a great background stamp, but you can see I started to get a little closer on the margins, you know, where the die lines go, and Zach does a great job getting all of those details out. Great stamps, again, for ID cards, for junk journaling, for all of those things. And then Tidbits came along, and I'm like, okay, I see how this is going to work. So what if I just design images in more of a linear fashion, where instead of doing all that little swoop-de-doo die cutting, you can just do linear die cut. So we just do a break. So this is like cut, 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 and then chop, 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 chop. This 55 different stamps are on Tidbits. So it went from 35 to 44 to 55. Amazing. And what I love about this set is because there's always little nuances that I love, and I know a lot of makers love, where you can add a little number, a little graphic, a little pointy finger, just a little tidbit to your make. Maybe that's a card or a tag, or you do junk journaling, or you're doing ID cards, or you're doing ATCs. And the thing about this, if you think, well, how do I use it on a card? Well, like I said, you could use it as a background. But the other thing about this is if you have any other elements, and again, I'll talk about ideology, very inspired by things like this that we do in ideology, right? The little snippets where you get a pack of all these little numbers. A stamp set like this allows you to create this on whatever cards you want, whatever type of cardstock you want, whatever inked background you want. Or if you get a pack like ideology labels, you have all these blank labels, and now you have little tidbits that fit all of these little things, right? You have little tiny stamps where you can do like collect on that, and you can ink it, and you can do all your own collage work. Even if you don't want to buy finished goods, if you have any dies. I mean, that's the whole thing about crossing over for all of the brands that I do. Like Stampers could be inspired by ideology, but it can still work with ideology. It can work with Sizzix. So if you have like the vintage labels where you want to die cut your own labels, well, now you've got tidbits for all these little labels that you can create. If you bought any of that stuff from the Chapter 3 release that we did, where it's got Postal, Collector, and Specimen, now you've got images to stamp on the file folder or the slide frame, or maybe you want to stamp on these little jewelry tags or the tickets or these labels, or maybe you want to stamp on these labels or the little envelope that came in. That's where Tidbits really comes in handy, because you have all of these that you can add to it. It's not like you just stamp that. You can still stamp like a little flower or a little toadstool or whatever. So that is why a set like this is so important, and that is why I'm so grateful when I can pack as many things on there, because that's all you need is just like a little tidbit. And because the stamps, you know, the way they are, you can just use them because they're blocky enough. You can just use them and stamp them without a block, or if you have a grid block, and I mean, I do make like tiny little grid blocks, but you can take a grid block, or maybe you have some little acrylic piece that you have, maybe you have an old fragment, but you can also stamp with small blocks. So I think sometimes when you see an image, you look at it and you're like, what would I ever do with it? The thing is like, what would I ever do without these? They're very good kind of fill in the blank stamps. So that is Tidbits. Then we get into Deconstructed, and Deconstructed was just a lot of very industrial, almost steampunk ideas rattling around in my brain, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I kind of put this set together, and it was, you know, I actually really struggled with the name. Paula helped me with the name, because I'm like, it's just very like parts and pieces, but I don't want to say that. And she's like, Deconstructed. I'm like, there we go. So it has an industrial vibe. There's a cool kind of graph, almost map. This came from an old transit bus ticket, but I just love the graph and the maps with the numbers. Then there's an X or a plus. So you can use it as a plus sign, very industrial design, or you can use it like an X on the map. This one I really loved because it reminded me of like an industrial color wheel, right? The whole circle and all the dots. I love the idea of a palette or an industrial color wheel for this art. These actually came out of an old stamp catalog, an old rubber stamp catalog. When you would buy industrial stamps, you could actually choose your font or your numbers, and I loved it. I thought it was very cool. I love the arrows. This came from a piece of ideology when we did Layers Urban. And then I loved this old school keyboard. This came out of an office catalog that had just this, it's a very cool layout for a typewriter keyboard. It's not traditional. And I loved it. I thought it was really, really odd and really fun. So that is a great set just to do a lot of, well, fill in the blanks. But you'll also see some inspiration with the makes of how this can be used with previous stamp sets. I'm not going to do any spoilers as to what stamp set it works with. Then we will talk about this. And I want to thank Mario for this because the guy was incredibly patient because I spent a week on this image. There were times that I was very frustrated and probably not the best person to be around because I had a vision that I wanted this stamp to be, but I'm not super skilled in the Photoshop world. I can get by. I do all my own Photoshop and stuff like that for the images. But this was a brush in Photoshop. If you're familiar with the brush, it's like a digital stamp. And I licensed this art that had 12 digital stamps, which meant all of the images were like on one thing. But I didn't like any of them as they were. I wanted little bits from each thing, and I couldn't isolate those. So I went in and clipped 151 different images and collaged this myself to create Hodgepodge. And because I loved it so much, I've always wanted just one giant stamp, a huge one. You've seen I've done Tidbits, and I talked about how people use these as backgrounds. And I wanted a stamp. I saw someone just say Creative Chaos. You're totally right, Carla. I'm like, I wanted a stamp that was just that was just chaotic, that had imagery everywhere, that I can use it as a fill in the blanker. I could take this stamp, you can leave it on the block, you can peel it off, but the nice thing is you can have a piece of cardstock and you can just roll it in the Hodgepodge and you kind of get what you get and you don't throw a fit. Or you can actually use it and isolate specific parts that you like, and you have endless collages without doing any type of collage work, any type of masking, any type of layering. It's already done. And it makes no sense. And that's what makes Hodgepodge so great. So when I said to Ted, I want to do one giant stamp that fits the sheet, he's like, well, I know it sounds easy, but it's actually quite logistic to have enough pressure on an image this size, especially one with an insane amount of detail. He's like, so, we'll give it a shot and see if it works. And so again, thank you to Stampers Anonymous for really making this. It is my favorite stamp of all times. And I've never put 151 different layers on one image, and I freaking love it. So that is what Hodgepodge is. And when you see the makes, I think you'll fall in love with it too, because it is a very cool, unique stamp to do. But it is one giant stamp. I mean, it's massive. It's the whole size. I saw somebody asking the size. I think these sheets are like 5 by 8, I think is the whole size, but I know that Stampers Anonymous will have the proper measurements. But it's giant. I mean, it's definitely more than an A2 card. It's meant for a big background. And you do you, and I did me, and I loved it. Okay. You did. I really did. All right, let's get into the makes. So like I said, the makes are broken down by sets. So I'm going to organize these, and I'll bring in the sets as we go through, just so you can kind of pair it together. I'll hand that off to Mario. Thanks, Mario. You can take that, and you can take that. Perfect. All right, I'm going to leave those right there. Okay, let's start with this one. We're going to start with Sign Painter, and you can see how the makers used a lot of really, really cool things. I absolutely love it. So there we go. Yes, I do. I did love it so much. And Ted, you're the best. Ted is really a great guy. He is. He's like, you loved it so much you did it twice. Yes, you're absolutely right. That'll be our secret. All right. So these first cards, this is a set that Kathy did. I'm going to leave this right off to the side. I love these because, again, you can really see the fun and versatility of Sign Painter. Because some people are like, oh, they're going to be really hard to line up. They're not hard to line up. They're blocks. But you can see how that strip stamp that comes with can be played. You can do it for lines because it does create that great brushstroke line. You can block things off if you want. You can do a kind of a wonky plaid. It just reminded me of like a sign painter. It had a very hand done look. And I love how Kathy went in and not only stamped in color, but then just went in with a pen and then did some sketchy outline. So that's it. You make a blend, stamp in colors, and then just go in and do a sketchy bit because you can't screw it up. It's already brushstroke. So do your little scribbly bits on the outside, and that creates some very cool, very handmade cards because it does look like you hand lettered it because you kind of did. You stamped it, that was your outline, but then you went in and did the little sketchy bits. I think that is really cool. And that's the importance of that other set because, yeah, you can just use them by themselves, but I also love the fact that you can use it with pens. You can also use it with the sketchy. Love it. Aren't those good? They're really, I just think they're to me, they're so fun with the cards. And I'm just going to start building it up on the background. I like to do that. I'll build as we go, and then we'll move stuff around at the end. Or, yeah, I think I'll do that. I'll build as I go. I do like that. This next card, Rochelle created this. I'm just I was just getting tangled in the web. I want to pull all these out. I do love that. I love where, you know, makers do all that wonderful stitching. So Rochelle created this, and there you go. Another idea for Sign Painter where you can take that and you can stamp a word in repetition. You can play around with the colors, and then you can stitch the elements. This is something that you can stamp a bunch of sentiments ahead of time, and then you can cut them out. I love that she just did repetition in different colors, and then she added just a little moth. This could be, it's probably from Hodgepodge, but you could use it with any other detail elements. And then I do love the messy stitching, right? Who doesn't love messy stitching? I love that. All right. Paula created this card. There again, you're going to see a lot of ideas for an alphabet. Sometimes people don't get an alphabet set because it freaks you out. Don't freak your freak on this. It is an easy stamp set because it could be backgrounds or it could be a word. And I love how Paula just did the word love, but then did it in just black ink and then stamped it in a different color ink and then stitched around the box. So this is all one layer. I just love the highlight of that, and she used embossing glaze over that. So just that one word, not only is it a different color, but it's got that little bit of shine. Isn't that a great card? Cute idea. So this is one of those stamp sets that if you're like, oh, I don't know what to do, just sit down and start stamping out some words. See what you get. You don't know. And it doesn't have to be fussy. It could be really fun. Sharon created these. So no sewing, no collage, no pen work, just your stamp set, some colors, and white cardstock. So here, this is done with Distress embossing glaze. So you can stamp in clear ink, and then you can use embossing glaze, or you can stamp in a color of ink. You can stamp with your oxides or Distress ink and use your glaze. But I love how these are all done in different colors, and they're all shiny. It's what I love about Distress embossing glaze. You have that translucent color of Distress, but also that wonderful shine. But it doesn't take away from the brushy stroke of Sign Painter. Isn't that good? See, this is one that I think even if you maybe saw this online, it just looks like a block font, and you don't really appreciate all the little wispiness of that font. See all that little speckly fleckly? That is all part of the image. Again, red rubber gives you that detail, but that's what makes it nice. And you probably, you know, can't really catch that detail when you see it. I love it. I love that. So yeah, hooray. You are the best. Yeah, for sure. Joy created this one. So if you wanted to create a background, you can see in the back, this is a little bit of tidbits. This is what I was saying, that you can take all those linear little tidbits and use it as a background. But then she went in, I love how many makers used embossing glaze, and stamped that over it, because Distress embossing glaze, the reason I know that it is translucent. So because it is embossed, you can still see your background. That is what makes Distress embossing glaze very unique and different than just regular embossing powder. Can you use regular embossing powder? Of course. But if you want to stamp over a background and actually see your background through your embossed design, Distress embossing glaze, because it is translucent, allows you to do that. And it's fun. Fun and colorful and cute. I love hello. Put hello, hello. You can also kind of get your vintage on. Rochelle made this one as well. See, you can go clean and simple. You can go vintage. It can just be an accent. That's what I was saying. You can just stamp a bunch of sentiments. So even if you don't want to stamp on a card, right? Maybe you don't want to stamp directly on a card because you're like, oh, what if I screw it up? You know, what if I'm like 3 lines in and I mess up one of the letters? Well, another great way is just take a piece of cardstock, stamp this out. If you don't, because it only has one of each letter in the set, if you don't duplicate a letter, you can go ahead and line those up. But if you have tools like a grid block or a stamp tool, you just place the letters on the line of your grid block or on the line of your stamp tool. And if you have to duplicate a letter, then you just skip that step. I just go to the end, stamp that, and then continue the lineup. But there's so many stamp tools and clear blocks that it is very easy to line up. But in this idea, you can just stamp words on cardstock, then cut it out, then attach those to the cards. So if you have that fear of like how Sharon did, I mean, you know, that's just kind of going for it and giving it your best shot. I mean, the beauty of this is if I was going to approach this, I wouldn't pre-cut my cardstock. I would just start with a piece of cardstock, stamp, and then the size of the card determines how much space I used on the letters. But I love that she also paired it with that embroidery set. You see how I mean when you see how embroidery is used? It's that great coloring book that can go through so many things. And I love how she actually stamped just on like dictionary paper and then colored through that. That's the nice thing about having some outline stamps. So many
I
great
did see
ideas.
a few
Yes?
questions about the letters. Maybe you
Yes?
talked about it, about how big the letters are, how tall.
Oh, if you just grab a ruler, I'll tell you real quick. I want to say that they're an inch or an inch and a quarter, but I'm not sure if I measured just the font itself or the bleed. Yes, 1 inch.
Thanks.
1 inch tall. There you go.
1 inch.
There you go. Next up, take a look at this. Zoe created this card, Zoe Hillman, and I love how you can, take the stamp set and actually call out a theme or call out a word. You can see that there's some elements here from Deconstructed. There's that graph that I was telling you about. I do love the light bulbs. Those are from Curiosity Shop that we did earlier this year. Those are the light bulbs. And I love how Zoe just created like a little industrial look. And then all these little tidbits are tidbits. This is what I was saying about that stamp set, that having these things that are completely insignificant, like this little number strip, this 275, like, is it significant? No, it's significant that it's a stamp. That's its significance. But now you've got those random elements that you can stamp, those tidbits. That's what makes the set actually so useful, because you have, I also call them fill in the blankers, because you can make something and you're like, oh, it's missing a little bit here. I want to add a little here. A set like this is a good fill in the blanker, because you can just fill in those blanks of elements. So I love this, Zoe. I love just really how fun that you can take an image of a set that maybe you already have and create a theme or an idea for it. You can also just you can create it's like license plate art. Keisha did this one. So in the background, we can see Hodgepodge back there, but I just like HBD 2U. You can stamp in paint, you can emboss, you can do all sorts of elements. So even if you don't want to spell out words, you can still just use letters and numbers to create your message. Isn't that fun? That's very, very cool when it comes to utilizing an alphabet set. I think that's really fun. Jeanette created this one. Jeanette created this, so pause, and I'm sure I'm not saying it with the proper inflection, but this is Spanish for peace. And Jeanette just loved the fact that you can take an alphabet set and you can stamp out words or sentiments in a different language. And I think that's really great how she incorporated this in her collage work and then did peace. It's beautiful. So that's the thing to know about an alphabet set. It really is customizable to the maker. And I think that's great. And even if you don't want to do cards, because Jeanette does a lot of mixed media, a lot of collage, you can still incorporate stamped elements in your work. Isn't that great? Beautiful. I love the little tiny attacher on there too. All right. This one, there's a lot. I'm just going to start building on this pile just because. Louisa created this. I thought it was really, really charming and sentimental how she utilized the alphabet and just did take what you need. That's the title. And then what she used is she used the sentiments from Floristry to just use certain words to actually do that little tear off thing. And I love how she tore off some strips. You can see Hodgepodge in the back. See a great background stamp for that. But like, take what you need. Maybe you need a little happy, maybe so much. Maybe you need a little you time, or maybe you just need a friend, or maybe you need love. I thought that was really a very charming, very heartfelt make. Isn't that great? I think it would be, even if you didn't want to do it big, you can even do this idea small. But I liked how she used just certain words from that stamp set, and all you have to do, you can either cut them. I know a lot of makers just chop up their words, but you can also just ink that word, just ink it and then stamp it. So just a very clever idea. And that's the whole part of live. We do lives just so you can get ideas and you can be inspired by them. So I'll put that over here. I told you I just have to start building it up. They're just going to get stacked. That's how it is. I've got some great scatter shots coming up. Kubert created this. So we did have quite a few makers that went in and hand cut. They kind of fussy cut around this. I do know that Simon Says Stamp, they do have coordinating dies for, I think the alphabet and the numbers. They're separate for sign painter. So I think that's really cool. But the makers for this, they just hand cut. Because again, it's sketchy, so you can also be wonky. But I love how Kubert took the stencils, did a little background. There you can see some little tidbits in there. I love that element, little crackle paste, and then paired it with the ideology sticker. So you can also just stamp a word that pairs with something else that you have, be that a sticker or chipboard or anything like that when it comes to working with it. I just think that's great. There's Believe. Barbara created this one. I love how Barbara went in and took the stamp, the strip stamp, and just stamp that out just to create the diagonal pattern. You can see there's, love that little shimmer. These look more like mica stain than spritz, but I could be wrong. It's still got shiny beauty. And I love how she's got that little heart from Love Notes, All We Need Is Love, and then just did the love in different colors and then cut it out. Again, fun. Just gonna, can only pack this in. I'm either have to be really far out or really close up, but it is what it is. Stacy created this. So remember that, you know, not all alphabet sets have numbers. I'll say that. But whenever I can include letters and numbers in a set, I'll do that. So Stacy created these. These are pillow box dies. These are from my Sizzix collection. So you can take that. Because it is a die cut, you can already stamp on your paper before you assemble this. So I love how she used Hodgepodge in the background. And then she used this impresslet seal, which I know she loves. So previous stamps, little happy birthday, but then use the numbers from Sign Painter to do little birthday packages for like a 30th birthday, 50th. It's another great thing about having alphabet and number set is that you can go in and add little elements. See? Happy birthday, or it could be anniversary. I mean, really, it could be any kind of, I don't know, any kind of significant date. All right, a couple more cards. This one is from Zoe with a Y, Zoe Scarpelli. Here you can see Sign Painter. I know we've seen a lot of words, a lot of meaning. You can also use it as a background. It is a very fun background because you can just stamp it. If you've got some little missing bits, all the better. But this is just like an embossed resist in the background. And then she went in and also used Hi and then incorporated friend. Again, I love how makers use this with this. It works. You don't think it would work, but it's like, see, makers use two sets together. I love that. And I love seeing that, you know, it is an alphabet element. And then Kath created this. I love, again, the inky rainbowness of Sign Painter. So you might look at this and already just break a sweat because, oh my gosh, I don't want to stamp a word. Okay, but it is an amazing background stamp because you can ink it, you can emboss it, and it pairs with so many things. Of course, this one is paired with French Garden, so you see the Great Botanical, but it just gives it a whole different vibe. Some Ideology Cellotape, little stamp here also from French Garden. So we loved adding those little elements because I think just that little script in box, sometimes people say, why do you pair it with that? Because, you know, you don't have to get tidbits. You know, we always like to add little things to our stamps, but it is really nice that you can go in and create that card and have those little elements as well. So nice, isn't it? Great inspiration when it comes to working with Sign Painter. I love that. And you're going to see this throughout some other makes because other makers are like, wait a minute, I use Sign Painter. Yes, but it's paired with other images. So I wanted to just wanted to kind of keep it that way. All right, moving on. Let's go. Let's see, what do we got here? Okay, put this here. Just gonna stay organized. You got a basket? I'll throw these in. Be great. Thanks, Mario. Sure. All right, look at all these makes. Amazing makers. And these makes, what's great, the makers are so generous. They donate these to Ted at Stampers Anonymous. So if you ever go to any of the shows where Stampers Anonymous, you'll see the makes in real life. I know a lot of people do, and then they're like, oh my gosh, I saw the make. Yes, it's cool to see the makes in real life. All right, next one we're going to talk about is Floristry, CMS 485. And again, this one does have that grid block that comes with it. Okay, so for this set, it's definitely very floral centric, but it's the design of this flower and why I wanted to kind of create this 360 flower so you can use any parts and piece. So you'll see the makes, and sometimes it looks completely different than the others depending on how this was used. So I absolutely love this. All right, so we'll start with this card. Kathy created this one. So now we're kind of going in from Sign Painter into Floristry because she created that background. But I love how she utilized just random letters in the background, but then did love in black. So do it in a different color ink, and then you've got like that hidden word that stands out. I also love, again, how she used that brush stamp. But here, she just took the design, Floristry, stamp it, and then die cut it. So what's really great about having a design that really goes everywhere is that you can stamp a sheet and you can die cut it into a shape, or you can die cut and then stamp the die cut. It doesn't matter which one you do first. But I love the idea of just seeing that image nested in that shape. Isn't that great? Really, really clever. So whether you're doing a heart or maybe you want to do boxes, squares, whatever you want, I just think that's very clever. And I love the sentiment. So the sentiment font, I wanted to have a very clean and simple design that would stand out against this very cool background. So love that card. Love it. Then Nico created these cards. So here's where you can start seeing really the potential of floristry, that you can stamp it and cut it out, but you can also just use parts and pieces. And this is what I was saying, that you're going to see cards and you're going to be like, well, what stamp is that? Oh, it's the same as that one. No, I'm talking about the one that kind of looks like fall leaves. Yeah, I know the one you're talking about. It's that one. So the beauty of that, because it's such a big stamp, is that using just parts and pieces, like Nico just went in and used the edge, because if you look at it, it's kind of circular, but it's also kind of square. I did that so you would always have some straight angles. See, when you see it, now I'm showing you all the secrets. But it does allow you to create wonderful borders just by stamping around that you can color in. And again, he used Sign Painter just to cut that out. Joy, best wishes. Or you can just use it coming in from the top, the bottom, the side. However you angle that, that's where that block really came into play. It was just important that, having that wonky size block, it just gave you a little bit of creative freedom that when you're holding it, you can just be like, okay, I want to stamp it here, or I want to just stamp the edges. All those things. That to me is really important as a maker. Not only do I design, but I'm like, how do I want to use it? I think it is important as a maker you figure out how you want to use it before you design something. So great cards showcasing the versatility of how floristry really can play. Zoe Hillman created this. I always love color, and I love how people interpret color. And we know that Zoe, she is definitely with me on the dark side. Love a good grunge. So coloring on craft or with inks or pencils just to create that subtlety is beautiful. So it could be bright and vibrant. It can have a touch of vintage, or it can be full-on vintage. And I love this card that Zoe did. Again, it can bleed off the edges. There's no right or wrong way to use floristry. Pair it with a little bit of ideology tape. Nice, beautiful. And I know, when it comes to coloring, especially on craft and doing a little flicking of the water, grunge good. You're going to see a lot of different colors because you don't always have to go on the grunge side. We'll start lightening up a little bit. So Rochelle created this one. Again, very vintage, still using distress and some grunge. You can see the background here. There's Hodgepodge. So when you see Hodgepodge, you think, oh, that's just so weird. It's perfect with anything. It really is, even florals, because it just creates that little interest. And you would stamp it in a light color so it doesn't compete with what you're doing. But I love the fact that it just adds some interest to the background where, if you want something a little bit more than ink blending, not that there's anything wrong with that. I love how Rochelle went in and did coloring, but then also stamped a second time and just cut that out. I think that's really great. I think that's a great detail. Again, I think there's coordinating dies for this that actually have some flower elements that Simon has. I love little Best Day Ever done in vellum. Obviously the stitching detail, it's just beautiful. But see, you can see it as from different makers, floristry takes on a whole different, in my opinion, a different look just depending on how makers color it, what they choose to color it with, how they use it, and it just keeps going. Sharon created this, so you can actually take a design and see, Nico came in from the top, this one from the left, Zoe came in from the left and kind of bleed off, Sharon kind of in that right angle. You can position this however you want and it will look amazing every time. It's so crazy how these flowers take on like that mirrored look almost, but that's just rotating the stamp. That's why I wanted that big old stamp. But I love how Sharon went in and just added a little bit of purple in the background. You can see some spritz on there, just that little bit, because that's really the intention of spritz. I know a lot of people are like hosing things down with spritz because, oh, it's great. Spritz is meant for spritzing. It really is meant for just those little, see those little spritzes of metallic? Oh, it's so pretty on there. Love that card. Love it. Kubert created this. Again, see, we're just going bold and bright and vivid. And so I love, again, you can see there's some spritz on there. I do love that. Little shimmer on there as well. But stamping, so whether you're coloring with markers or watercolor or any of that, and you're going to see floristry used, really that's not even colored. So I don't want you to think like, oh, denied, I'm not a colorer. Okay, it's still a great stamp for backgrounds, you'll see. But I love how Kubera took that in, again, did that little messy sewing detail. That's a great way to frame the work. And I love that sentiment. See, that sentiment looks really good. Black and white, looks good on vellum, looks good in a color. It was a good font, I have to say. When I found it, I'm like, that's it. Paula created this. So this is an etc. tag. This is a Stampers Anonymous etc. tag. This is that hardboard. Love the idea. There's that beautiful stencil from the previous release that she did in the background. Again, you can see just that little splattering. Love that little shimmer of the spritz. And I, again, stamped in from the side and then layered. So stamp it a second time and then just go in and cut these out, dimensionalize it. Just gives that work just that little touch and can really highlight the florals that you want to highlight. And then she stamped Love You on it. So it takes on like a totally different approach, right? We'll move these. I'm going to need some real estate. I do love the idea of how that image just starts creating so many different looks. Keisha created this. Very clean, very simple. Just going in, stamping it on white cardstock in black ink, and then coloring with markers. So like I said, whatever your coloring medium is, you can just sit there and color it. The image lends itself to that. That's what I was saying, that I really loved how bold, because of that lino cut, kind of wood carved look. It really gives great definition, but it also allows you enough space to color. Beautiful, right? Beautiful, beautiful. Speaking of beautiful, this guy needs no introduction. We give an image to Alberto and we're like, okay, let's see what happens. And he does his magic. I always find it amazing when I see it. I'm like, where's the image? But it's there. Obviously, clearly he followed the image, but how he does that coloring, that no line, because he stamps it, but it definitely removes a lot of that carving detail, and it just creates that beautiful blended color that he does. It's always inspiring. I mean, I think you'd never really imagine that pairing, right? Of Alberto doing that along with all the grunge vintage, but he always manages to be like, I'm just going to do my style with those images. And I always find it's just a great reminder that sometimes it's all about perspective. Sometimes you can look at it and you can dismiss something right away because you assume it's not your style, instead of taking the creative approach to be like, how can I make that my style? Because you like it, right? If you resonate with something and you might think, oh, that's not my style, but how can I make it my style? Just remember that. You can always make it your way. You can do you, just depending on, well, how you want to approach it.
Color like that?
I couldn't. And I watch it, it's like, it's so, yeah. The blend is like, the transition it's seamless. It is. It's just flawless. But, I just think that everyone doing their own style is the most rewarding part as being a maker. So Joy created this card. I love the coloring, and I love just that addition of spritz, just adding that little bit of shimmer to the top. So whether you're doing watercolor, whether you're doing crayons, you can add shine, you can add glitter, you can add dimension. I just think it's really great. And I love the little thanks so much on there. Cute. I think it is important to just remember that an image can be used however you see it. Case in point, Anita. Love seeing all of these colorful images, but then you're going to see some images, and there's a couple makers that did this image on black. So Anita created these cards, going in and stamping, and then using, these look like gel pens to me. There's like a lot of highlighting in there, which, I mean, it just reminds me really of those like black velvet paintings. The contrast is it's so cool. It has such a great look and great dynamic, almost neon-like. But you can use the stamp as your guide and then just go in and do the detail pen work. But very cool, right? A great contrast to this, where you're looking at an image and you're like, I don't really know. I look at this and I'm like, ooh, but I love it. So you can still appreciate imagery and kind of do your thing. I absolutely love that. But very, very cool look. Then Barbara created these. I always love when makers do a couple, sometimes, you have an idea and you stick with it, but sometimes you're doing it and it just, creativity takes over and you do a couple versions. So Barbara created these. Here you can see just a background using, I love the idea of just blending some spritz on the background. But you can use spritz, you can use mica stains, you can use really any kind of medium you want for a background. But I love how she took Floristry and stamped it and embossed it in black. Remember that if you're doing a background, especially if it's something that's pigmented and you want your image to pop, it's always a good idea to emboss it versus just stamping it in black ink. You can stamp it in black ink, but embossing is always going to give you a little bit more of that saturation, a little bit more of that contrast. But here you go. You don't have to go in color because you're letting your background do the magic for you. I love that little highlight. She went in with a little bit of little stickles, little glitter glue just to do the center of the flowers. But there you have it. That's showing how you can take that image, and if you don't want to go in and do the coloring, the boldness of that style, that's what it's all about, having that bold design. You can still stamp on black in color. Tammy B created this, again, embossed as that outline, and then just going in and coloring. You can use paints, you can use pencils. Anything pigmented is going to show up best on black cardstock. Distress ink won't work on black cardstock. It'll just disappear, but distress watercolor pencils or crayons, again, acrylic paints, even oxide would work. But I love how she just took that approach and created this background card. So many ideas, so many. It's like I just keep digging through the box. So Jen created this card. Again, an idea about thinking of how you can use a big image, because again, sometimes people will look at the size of the stamp. They're like, you always make the stamp so big. Why don't you make this tiny? Well, because this just allows you to edit. So here Jen created, if you look at the background, I'll hold this back, you can see that the image, a much bigger chunk of the image was stamped, and you've got that wonderful teal oxide back there on craft. But then she highlighted, stamped it again on white, and then just kind of finished that image almost like you're looking through a lens and seeing that highlighted colorful image. So I really like just that whole idea of highlighting a section but still filling in the card with Floristry. It's clever, right? A great way to just use images, use stamps. And sometimes you can look at an image that you wouldn't think is a background, and it is a background. Juliana created this card. There's so many things going on. So of course we have Sizzix, so we have the Vault Scribbly Butterfly, really one of my favorites. I love that scribbly because it's got this outline, but it's also see-through because it's so scribbly, and it goes with a lot of different styles. If you look at the background, you see the green, that watercolory look, Floristry. So you look at an image and you wouldn't think, one, it should be a background, and it can, and two, you always have to stamp and color it. No, you can stamp, spray it with water, and get a great watercolor background, and then you can see the little tidbits in there, stamped, stitched right up the middle. That's why I said there's so many great elements to a card. Use what you like. This is what I was saying. You don't have to follow any rules and go, oh, well, this was designed as this, I need to do this. No way. You do what you want. Do it the way you want to do it. All right. This next card set, Louisa created this. Again, do you. She also is a lover of neutrals and vintage. But look at that style of using the stamp. There's embossing, so you can see that the image is done in gold in the background, but then it's also stamped in oxide. So when you stamp and you spritz the oxide, you get that great oxidation and watercolor. So I love that, you don't have to stick to one medium. You can stamp and do your ink, but then you can add that beautiful detail highlight in the metallic. And I love this torn reveal of the sentiments. Isn't that great? So this is repetition. This is kind of coming up with this cool creative formula and sitting down and just knocking out a bunch of cards. That's the other thing to remember as a maker. Quit putting pressure on you to reinvent the wheel every time. If you have a good idea, celebrate the heck out of it. Do it as many times as you want. There's nothing wrong that every card needs to be this innovative approach to using something. You can see it and you're like, I love this. Do it multiple times, because in one little session of just sitting down and stamping and embossing and inking and do this kind of in that compartmental theme, before you know it, look, you knocked out 4 cards. Or these could be journal pages, or these could be a lot of things. And so I think we really have to just celebrate what we like instead of always thinking that we need to create something that no one's ever seen before. That's really a tough challenge. And I love just even that idea of the reveal. And the makers are here to inspire you. So that's the other thing. Never apologize for being inspired by somebody. The only thing to remember is just acknowledge the inspiration. I think that's always really great. It's just to say, hey, you know what? I was inspired by this idea from Louisa, or I love the idea of coloring. I just think that's great. Doesn't mean they owned it. Who knows? They were inspired by somebody. You don't know. Nobody knows that. I don't know. Vicky always inspires me. Look at this grunge perfection. I know that if an image is going to go to Vicky, much like Alberto, she's going to do it, but she's going to do it her way, and suck it up, Buttercup, because that's how she likes to do it. It's always going to be industrial. It's always going to be, well, very Vicky. And here she took that image, stamped it, did a little bit of coloring on craft, and then ran it through the embossing folder so you get that great wood grain crackly texture in there. But of course you need to stamp first and then you can do the embossing. I love that, you know, card size, you know, people like A2, A5, slimline. It's like the card will be whatever size it is when I'm done chopping up this background. That's what it is. And that's how I am. I'm like, what size card is that? I'm like, I don't know. It's the size that it ends up by the time I chopped it off or by the time I got what I got out of it. So again, a little texture hammer to dent the fasteners. Just gives it a, like, it's crazy to look at these and see all that's going on and see where we've come from and how you can take it from really pretty to clean to vibrant to backgrounds with, you know, black and spritz or something industrial. I love it. We still have a few more because, I mean, it's great inspiration for a stamp set. Kath created this. There again, repetition. Sit down, ink up that stamp, have some backgrounds cut if you want to make like A2 cards, stamp in black, go in and do some coloring. You can even do multiple stamping where you can stamp, you can often color with pigments and then stamp over it to get your outlines. But I love how Kath, again, celebrated the whole look of Floristry, where using parts and pieces and spinning the stamp makes it look like so many different stamps, but it's just one. It's how you use it. That is the joy of having something big. So again, before you look at it, you're like, oh, I wish it would be done like this. How about, that's cool. I'm going to use it this way and this way. So many great effects. I love it. I also love how she just kind of highlighted that sentiment. You know, you can either use a brush or use a blending tool or smudge, just cool. And the little white splatter, beautiful, great card set. And I do want to remind you as makers that not everyone is a maker. You know, not everybody that you know or all your friends are creatives in the sense of wanting to make something. So making a set of cards as a gift for someone is very cool. It can be a card, but making them a set and being like, here, I made you these cards that you can send out to your friends, people would so appreciate that. They really will. Zoe with a Y, Zoe Scarpelli created these. Look at these beauties. I love that all that thread just kind of hanging around. So you've got the sewing around the edge, but there again, very much her style. The loose watercolor, just the kind of little touch of vintage, a little bit of script stamping in the back, taking that approach and using the image the way you would use it. Or maybe not. Maybe it's just not your jam and you don't like it. But I love the fact that you can see from this whole assortment of inspiration that one thing that the makers really do celebrate, and I encourage them all the time, is just you do you. Do what inspires you. Doesn't really matter if it's inspired because somebody else saw it, if somebody told you about it, if you saw a video, if you're like, oh, I saw this, but I'm going to try to change this. It's no different than like a recipe, right? Where you tweak it and you want to add some little additive to it. So there you go. That's a lot of inspiration for CMS 485 Floristry. All that inspiration from a stamp set.
Beautiful.
I
love that.
It's so cool.
My favorite
Yeah,
right there.
it's so cool to me to just see the inspiration, and that is what I'm always so grateful of the makers that just get that and they're like, okay, he says it. Very cool. All right, look at that. Just the coloring. Starting with a die cut. There you go. All right, moving on to another floral set of a whole different vibe. This is embroidery. This is CMS 486, and like I said, it's very outline, very kind of linear. So the first thing that you can rest with is if you're not a colorer, Kubert created this. This is probably going to be your jam because you can make backgrounds, be that ink or paint or even pattern paper. And I love the fact that you can take a stamp like this because it's got so much openness and you can just stamp it and it's beautiful because it really shows off all of your background work. So Kubert created this. It could pair it with a little bookmark or it could be a belly band. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do with the images, but I love how it's just embossed in white. So this could be done as a resist first and then do a background, but really it's great to do the background first because then you can kind of highlight the areas that you want to do. But whatever works for you, the little bit of gems, a little ideology plaque, just great. A little stitching around it. I love that. Great colors too. So again, it can be a card and a little gift. The beauty of working with embroidery. All right. It's nice. It's a nice design. It's good. This next one, I love this. Juliana created this. Another great thing, if you love alcohol ink and you love alcohol lift ink, this is a great stamp set for that because of those detailed lines. They really lend themselves to lift ink. I mean, there's several. That one does, Floristry does as well, the previous one. But it does allow you really to kind of lift that. I mean, I think alcohol inks are really great. Tune in next week. But I love the background of these fluid colors that she created, just doing this on Yupo. And then you go in with lift ink, and what lift ink does is that when you stamp it, it actually lifts off the alcohol ink, and you could even use what you lifted off on another card. But isn't that great? Because you still get to see the beautiful colors of alcohol ink, but then when you look at it, you've got that image. And I also love how she used all those little butterflies. Again, that's Sizzix Vault, that's the boutique die, those little fluttery little butterflies. They were tiny, but they make great embellishments, don't they? Tiny little butterflies in metallic. Beautiful cards, Julianne. I love just seeing how embroidery could be used like that. All right. Joy created this. Again, beautiful. Look at that background. Look at that spritz beauty right there. Distress spritz for the win. That shine, that shimmer, that wonderful blend. And then going in and stamping embroidery. Again, you have all that, the big outline. And then you can go in and highlight. You can highlight with more spritz. You can highlight with white. You can highlight with inks. But again, that's the nice thing about those stamps is that they can either take a very linear approach, be that vertical or horizontal, or depending on how you angle it, like where Juliana angled it, it just kind of works across. Because if it's on the diagonal, it can just kind of go off the edge. But using like this, you can, so it is great for slimline cards, anything that you want to create. But I love, I love those colors. I love the shine. We got another set of cards. Kathy created these. I love the set. So embroidery, even though it's the great outline, which you've seen, it's also really great for coloring. It's not a lot of area that you need to color. So it does allow you to still do your great backgrounds. So I love how she took this series of cards. You can see this is from Deconstructed, those numbers. See, I told you I love those little numbers. You can see the typewriter from Deconstructed. Then there's the other bigger numbers from Deconstructed, that little plus or X, depending on how you position it. So would you think Deconstructed would go with flowers? Nope. Does it? Yes. And it doesn't even have to be grungy. So I love how she did this whole little set and kept in that same color theme. Do this, how you attach the sentiments. These sentiments are from Floristry. So there is a lot of mix and match where you can take, like I said, Deconstructed, embroidery, Floristry, and use. And if you don't have the budget to buy everything, use what you have. This can still spark an idea, be like, you know what? I think I have a stamp set that's like similar. Great. Use it and pair it with things that maybe you wouldn't think to pair it with, because I think it does really work. It works in your favor. I love those. So many cool ideas, right? And so many card sets. Kath created these. I love this. There again, take an approach of a palette. So Kath created these beautiful backgrounds in pinks, and then did almost like some spotlight coloring, where here she stamped embroidery, but you know, she let the pinks kind of show through, but then went in and added the green to the leaves, added a little bit of script from French Garden. You can see here using that embroidery in the background, see it in brown like watercolor, again a little script, and then stamp the embroidery and highlight the leaves. Or if you switch your background, so now your background is green instead of pink, now you can just highlight both elements. Great cards. Such a, this is, I mean, I have to say, this set really did surprise me, because when Paula was like, oh, I really like these, you know, she picked them out of a vintage embroidery ephemera, and I'm like, but they're just so simple. It's like a coloring book. And she's like, I know. That's what I love about it, is that having that simple line style is really going to allow a whole different level of creativity. I'm like, I don't know, but hey, I trust it. You do it. So Anita created these. So see, you can get as colorful, as simple, or as funky as you want. Anita did these. These are alcohol ink backgrounds, stamped and then lifted some of that image out. Love the lift ink of the alphabet. So here she lifted these from Sign Painter and then stamped it over there, because whatever you lift, you can actually stamp. That's going to be a great demo that we're going to do next weekend. But a lot of cool things to do with images. And like I said, these really lend themselves to working with alcohol ink. They absolutely do. Then we've got some, I mean, it's really interesting how makers always take a whole different approach. Tammy B created this using embroidery, but kind of like a cut edge on a card. So I love using paste with cards. I think it gives it such a great tactile. So Tammy used distressed crackle paste and then used embossing glaze on this. This was a technique we saw so long ago. I remember the first time I saw it from Stacy, I'm like, what is that wizardry? And that's just glaze on crackle paste, and then when it dries, it cracks, and you heat it, and it just looks like shattered ceramic. I just think it's beautiful. And then she did that same texture on there. I just love this, Tammy. Using embroidery, kind of just like a divide, like a border. It's what I said. It could be vertical, it could be horizontal, but then following that, just cutting the card is great. So yeah, we have many makers. It's just interesting how they just cut it out in like just different ways. So these are 2 cards that Keisha created. So same kind of idea, just cutting that. And then I love how she not only used just embroidery just as, again, a coloring book, if you will, just coloring that in, but then she took that strip stamp from Sign Painter and did whimsical stripes, but then also did like a plaid out of different colors. So see, just that little stick stamp, if you're like, oh, I'm not stamping an alphabet. Yeah, but it does make for a great background, doesn't it? So fun cards that Keisha did. Just really has such a great whimsical look. I'll put this here, put this here. Gosh, it's always building the background. Sharon created this. So let's say you do a mixed media background. This is very mixed media for Sharon. I love it. I love all the different colors and textures. There's some hodgepodge back there. But then just stamping that like it came out of the pattern book, where you just leave it simple, black and white, and you put it on there and you get that contrast. I think that's also a really great idea for this stamp, that you don't always have to color it. You certainly can, but you can use it in many different ways. And if you already have color going on, maybe you want to treat it more like ephemera, where you're stamping, you're coloring, and you leave it. Or maybe you're going to stamp a bunch of base cards for people, and you send them some pencils or crayons and let them color it in. I think that'd be really clever. This is Sharon's other card using embroidery, where again, just stamping it on white and then just adding a few spot colors, not coloring the whole image. Isn't that cool? I love when makers just like, again, I'm going to do me. So yeah, you don't have to color everything. And even when I stamp and do color, it doesn't mean I have to color everything, because it makes the flowers just stand out so much more than if you did all of the coloring. I just think that's great. Really beautiful. Great way to use your watercolor, your inks, your pencils. Told you, it's a really cool set when you see it. And that's the whole idea of these lives. Seeing the makes and inspiration, to me, I always say, like, it just connects the dots. It does. Zoe with a Y, Zoe Scarpelli created this. I love so much going on. There's a beautiful background. There's oxides going on, a little hodgepodge kind of back there. But how not only did she stamp the embroidery, but look at that fussy cutting. What? I think there's dies for this one as well. But here's the cool thing. And it's a great approach. This is an idea, Zoe, that I'm totally going to do, because I love the idea that because it's got these little skinny little stems, she didn't cut those. No, she just cut out these little elements. Oh, this one got a little mangled. Here, let's fix that. There we go. She just cut out those elements and stuck them on the top, and then let the stamp fill in the blanks. So it's like stamping and then stamping again, doing cut. So it's like recoil for the win. Yeah, the recoil scissors. But it's a really great idea to just cut out the elements and don't freak out about getting all those little skinny bits cut out, because the stamp is there. It's really great. Very, very clever approach to using this. And you're going to see like what I did, because I was so impressed by how many people use this particular image in different ways. That's what you're going to see on these other cards. It's just one stamp that I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the same stamp as that. That's the same stamp as that. Cassie created this one, same stamp as that, but taking just beautiful look to backgrounds, little vintage, little messy mixed media, some stitching around there, some mummy cloth, but totally change up this stamp from being spotlight to being isolated. That's the same stamp. You'll see. It's crazy as it goes how many different ways this looks. Tammy created this. I love when there's coloring done on craft. There's so many great ways that it kind of creates these colors. Love that beautiful highlight look of that. And again, a skinny little card that Tammy did, but same stamp, different look because of the color. Beautiful. Then you can go tall, slimline like Barbara did. So even though it's a skinny stamp, you can highlight it. You can repeat a border if you want. And I love that background. I do see a little chatter. Yeah, the 6 is the 9. That's saving space. Anyway, I saw that. It's like, nope, wasn't missing. I love the texture of that Barbara created. And again, just the highlight on craft. Beautiful. So you can have it cropped or you can still use it on a big card, right? Really good. All right, putting that there. And then we have just a couple more cards. Alberto, there again, I mean, you can just tell his style, but taking that image and just doing that coloring magic, and it transforms everything, but it also creates a very cool visual look as far as the ability to go in and blend, but it does give you that foundation, just like Paula said. It's a great foundation for, well, like a coloring book. It does. It keeps it clean and simple. And I also love the idea of like these tall kind of tag cards. Really, really beautiful. Like so many different things using the stamp. But there's also some kind of mixed media project for this stamp set. So I'm going to clear the cards and we'll bring in those last few projects using embroidery. So let me just pile these up real quick. Very, very cool. I see the detail. There we go. Love it, love it. So many ideas. My word, so many ideas. All right. So of course with embroidery, Paula created this. This is an etc. panel. So again, same image, but this is what she was talking about when she's like, I just want that wonderful, delicate detail. That's how she described it. Delicate detail of an image. So look how well it pairs with ideology. There's that sign painter. So just adding an element, just an image, but stamping that on tags and creating a collage piece. So often you want to do a background, but you don't want the background to be busy, but this does allow you to create your own pattern paper. But I love just that white embossing on those ink tags, the stitching details, the little vintage buttons, the sellotape, the stickers, the clippings. I mean, yeah, it is. It's like vintage perfection, right? Just using that. Stacy created this. This is also etc. Stampers Anonymous. These are number 8. This is the hardboard. And look how she created this beautiful vintage tag. I love all the layers. I mean, look at all these threads and tattered edges of fabric. But you can see that beautiful stamp back there in embroidery, loosely colored. I love that she's got the little button details, a little ideology photo booth. Some clippings on there. Just says sweet love. A little bit of ribbon. Isn't that charming? So again, if you love vintage, this is really a great stamp set to add just that vintage detail to whether you're doing ideology makes or collage, really anything like that. Then we have this ideology display panel. I love that Louisa created this one. I love how, I mean, there's a lot of stamping going on. So you can see back here, she used the sign painter to kind of create, this reminds me of like Sugar Boo, Mario, right? There's old signs. I do love that, which the alphabet in there. So I love that that's the background. She's got some distressed crackle paste in there, probably a little bit of paint and some gesso. Then she's got this great embroidery hoop. I love how that connects it all together, right? Embroidery hoop for embroidery. So she's got that wooden hoop as a frame, and then just did Hello Friend with a little paper doll. But I love how she used all of those stamps so brilliantly. So this is on linen. There's linen right there. And she's got that stamped over it. There's some ephemera, but then she also stamped and just added those flowers around there. So it goes into the hoop, but then it also adds an accent. Isn't that great? So yes, you can create art with stamps. It can be cards, it can be tags, but it can be really whatever you dream up as a maker as to how you see imagery play out. That's the beauty. And so that's so much inspiration for this stamp set. CMS 486 embroidery, like sky's the limit. It was really definitely a good one. Really so cool. Thanks, Mario.
You're welcome.
Very cool. All right. So moving on with more florals, but taking a whole different approach, we're going to talk about French garden. And like I said, this was inspired by this collage paper. So you'll see the images just used totally different ways. And they definitely have a different impact as well. So we'll start with these cards. We're going to go with Louisa again. We went from the hoop right onto this because I just wanted to show that the importance of this particular set, because these images, they are a larger scale, but they have such great detail to them that it kind of, this reminds me of like the collage paper where you have just that black and white image that's so strong. And I love that they're stamps now because you can get so much more detail, especially if you do embossing, right? The intensity of that always has to do with embossing. So I love these cards that Louisa did, still kept with that neutral palette, she's got that paper, so it's stamped here, and she only went in and cut one edge. So if you look at the idea, it's stamped on that white paper and then just cut on one edge and then layered on craft. Isn't that cool? So it's like torn, cut, so this is still flush. That's a really cool way to incorporate that. Then she's got the leaves. That's just same stamp set, just stamped. You can stamp it a couple of times, do it a little embossing on craft. There's a lot of other little stamped images in there, a little hodgepodge or some tidbits. I just think it's really a great way to start out with the stamp set, because you might look at that and you might be like, oh, the coloring. Remember, you don't have to color everything. You can do what you like to do. You like to do the most. This little bag of tags that Paula created, I love this because there again, it really celebrates what this image was inspired by, which is just using it as a collage element. So this is sitting down and getting out your inks, getting out your sprays, your spritzes, your oxides, whatever it is you like to use. Do a bunch of backgrounds. You can do tags. These are distress number 5 tags. You can do number 5 is a little smaller than a number 8, but you can die cut tags if you have it, and just do all your inky play. Get a nice juicy permanent black ink pad and go for it. So here she used the French Garden in here, but then there's also sentiments from Floristry. You see how so far you've seen this used with Floristry, Embroidery, and also French Garden. It is that great font. But then some little tidbits. There's some numbers in there. Same thing. And this allows you just to sit down and knock out a bunch of these. These could be tags, because people go, what do you do with tags? Well, it's a tag. So you can hang it on something, you can write a message on the back, or you can just stick it onto a card front, and guess what? It's a card. So that's the beauty of having tags. They're, to me, a little easier to accomplish. You don't feel so intimidated to fill a larger space. But I love that. I love the detail. I also love the little Swiss dots. That's a great background stamp. It's one of my favorites in the background. See, love you, and just because. So it is nice to sit down and create a whole bunch of just different elements with a stamp set that you love. And we do love that. I'm really happy that the imagery will live on. That's what it is. It's important. Kath created this card. So again, I love the background. This is kind of from the other background that she did for Sign Painter, but I loved it because it really highlighted this floral. I loved that it was over that watercolor background. There's the ideology tape, the elements in there, again, from French Garden, from the different text and numbers. But I just love how she stamped that and just kind of chose the colors that were kind of in the background to color that flower. Isn't that cool? You know, instead of doing it pink and red, what's up here, she just kind of took that midline strip of color and did it. So good. Ideas abound. That's what it's all about. Kubert created this card. Love the background. I love the emboss, the texture, the design, just using stencils, and you can use any kind of texture paste or embossing. There's the image, stamped and embossed in black. So again, much like how she did with embroidery, you can do your backgrounds and just stamp an image. She did embroidery in white. She did this one in black, and it's stunning. It's an easy way to, I think, create and use your stamps more. Don't be intimidated by them. No way, that's overrated. Keisha created this card. So again, choose your color palette. You can see some stamp in the back. That's all from Tidbits, just a little industrial. I love the look of that. And I also love how it just goes in that whole resist look. She's got some tone on tone from the blues, and it transitions into pinks. It's got a little bit of crackle paste going on in there, and then that becomes the focal point. And again, embossing. Embossing. If you're not using your embossing powder because you think it's too messy, or your heat tool or whatever, what's the point? We have it to use it. And I do think that when you see these images, the majority of them are embossed. This one, because it's a simple background, doesn't necessarily need it, but you can certainly see the side by side, the intensity embossing powder gives an image. Doesn't mean every image should be embossed. I'm certainly not saying that. Sometimes you want it just to be more of your background. But if you're looking for a way to highlight an image, yeah, embossing powder is a good one. It does get messy. It's like sand on the beach, especially around here. I'm that person that kind of dusts it on the floor too often when I shouldn't, but I do. Zoe with a Y created these. I love the vintage approach to using French Garden. Again, that inky background. You can see the stamped resist in white. Love that. And then just stamping that floral and doing that loose watercolor where it can kind of go outside the lines. That pairs perfectly with the background. But great cards. There's a little hodgepodge in there so you can see. So these, we've got the numbers and digits. That's, of course, from Tidbits. But do you see where hodgepodge comes in? This is what I was saying. It's such a cool big stamp that when you use it as that fill in the blank, you're just going to get something interesting, often unpredictable. That's the beauty. It's like, well, why do I want an alphabet and, I don't know, an elephant? It doesn't matter. That's what makes it artistic. So great cards. Stacy created this whole little set. I mean, it's not designed to go as a set, but she just did so many different, I can pick out Stacy's style just because it's got that shabby, thready yum. And again, her card sizes are like mine. You just get what you get and you don't throw a fit. But I love that inky background, stamping that image, adding the numbers, the little elements to it, that kind of loose, messy stitching, leaving the threads out there. And some people are afraid to sew paper. Just step on it. Just go for it. Some people can really control it. I know there's a lot of makers that just have that precision cornering. Me, I'm like, I go right off the road and I love it. It's fun. But I love how, here's another, Stacy did this one. This is what I mean. Like, just look at that. That's some nutty sewing. I love that. You just go for it. Little torn paper, inked background, just sew and sew and sew. I bet that's like a tangled macrame mess in the back. And I bet it's beautiful. A little sewing around the edge. See, then she can get her detail on. And then paired with just that little stamp sentiment. Isn't that great? It just adds a really cool detail to that, doesn't it? It's so cool. And then she just kind of created this little booklet. It's really about the outside, but I love the idea of just kind of making a little folio. You know, whether you're doing a little handmade book, just cutting paper and inking and sewing. You can make your own journals just by adding your own little stitched elements. You can do a couple eyelets, but I just love that she did a little journal just to make for someone and then stamp the elements inside. But really the front of this, I love that. And you can see these little elements. So these little pieces, these are tidbits, and then using some of the script that came with French Garden. So tidbits are used pretty much on a lot of makes. They're just little things that often, well, just complete the story. So great inspiration, right? Just using those images. My gosh. All right. Joy created this card. Again, I love how she celebrates the spritz. You can always tell. As soon as the light hits it, I'm like, oop, distress spritz. It just has that shine, little splendor. But beautiful coloring over that watercolor background. Little hello friend. No fussy cutting involved. You don't have to do any embossing. You can just stamp and sit down and color. You can also do like batch making, where you make, you do all your stamping, you do all your backgrounds, and then one night you just sit and color. So I love this, Joy. Really great. I'll put it here. It's a great contrast to that black and white. So Cassie created this, again, vintage, so you can use all types of different colors. There's Hodgepodge in the back. That's the interesting creative chaos in the back. Then, of course, we've got that beautiful die cut. That's Sizzix, a little lace trim. And then the florals. So I love how the florals are stamped. And yes, these are fussy cut. But really cool how she paired those together and then just did noted. So this, I mean, it's a beautiful card, but this could also be the front of a notebook or in a frame. I mean, there's so many different things that you can do with stamps when it comes to adding layers. Barbara created this. So there again, same image, but different color palette. So to me, it reads very different. And I love how she paired it with that stencil, that little brushstroke stencil. That's a really good stencil to use if you're not really good at mark making like I'm not. It's a stencil that just does it for you. But great background. You can see that spritz detail, little sewing on there. Great card. Wonderful, wonderful cards. There's so many, really, so many cards. I love it. I love the inspiration. Alberto created these. I mean, you could just tell. I don't even have to, but I'll always give him credit. But you can totally identify that coloring style. But I love how he really created these arrangements. I mean, these floral arrangements by stamping and then stamping the berries, but it's all that no-line coloring that's just like, wow. And the little gems, the little highlights, and he's got just because and best wishes. But yeah, I mean, that coloring and that shading, even watching it, because I've watched many colors, I'm like, nope, I don't even understand. It's like a math problem. But beautiful. Absolutely incredible. Incredible, incredible. All right, let's put these over here. Oh, so far I'm doing pretty good. I'm building pretty well. Now, when it comes to images, because I like to show like images as they are, and then as I'm sorting the makes for live, I often think like, okay, that's a very different approach to using the image, and I love that. Jen created this. Even though you have an image that is very detailed, it can still be used as watercolor. Don't ever think that you can't use a detailed image for that loose watercolor style. So stamping in ink, and whether you're misting the stamp and stamping it in watercolor or highlighting. I love this card that Jen did. It's very, very fluid with the leaves in the back, that floral, and then she just went in and added a little bit of paste and some distressed rock candy just to give that little bit of that little sparkle on there, and then adding some ideology. But I mean, beautiful, a beautiful approach to using the image, because this image is that image, but you don't always need to capture the detail. That's the other thing. We want to have creative freedom. We want to just play. Tammy B created this, again, another watercolor approach where you can stamp and then you can just pull in some of that color from what you stamp if you stamped with a water-based ink, something reactive like distress, or you can stamp in something permanent and then blend in the color, whatever you choose. But I love how this also has that watercolor approach. We've got that beautiful watercolor stamped background, the little deckled edge from the decal trimmer, the tonic decal trimmer, just to give it that torn edge look, and a card. Great way. This, of course, could be a whole, I don't know, a whole stationery set, if you will. Look at that. This is really beautiful. Rochelle did this. I love the idea. Just, you can see that distressed spritz background. See that little highlight of spritz? But just, it's very soft. Like the coloring on this is so soft and pretty that Rochelle did. So here it's stamped, a little blended. So you can do your coloring with blending tools. You can do it with blending brushes. I mean, you can also create just that soft, wispy approach depending on how you add color to an image. But I thought it was unique. Because when, you can keep it black and white, you can color it, you can stamp it over a color background, you can do no line coloring, you can do watercolor, or you can do more of a blended color. See? Sky's the limit. It really is. There's so many different ways to use an image. Here's one that Keisha did. So this is just taking a background and then I was trying to capture that gold embossing. So even if you wanted it to be more of an element, because I think, when you use an image like this, it's more elemental. But I love the idea of just using it just with the embossed design just to bring out that color. So it's a great way to use a stamp. You can also use a stamp if you want to feature it in something. So Jeanette created a journal. So if you have a mixed media journal or art journal or junk journal, you can go in, even though it has other elements to it, you can take stamps and stamp the berries or stamp some leaves or stamp a flower and just cut it out and staple it in for ephemera. So stamps, yes, they can be used for cards and they can be used for collage, but they can also just be elements on a project that you've already created. So if that's just something of different papers, just, okay, I'm going to stamp that and use that as an embellishment. Okay, on this one, I'm just going to actually stamp it right into the artwork. And that is really the freedom of stamps. Stamps are tools. I think that's an important thing to remember. Stamps are tools. That's what they are. Anita created these. Anita was really going with the black backgrounds. I think she kind of gets a theme and just goes with it. But I love how she did the coloring. So she's got the embossing and then did coloring. It's almost like a chalk painting, if you see that, just how that color is in there. Like with oxides, very creamy, dreamy. Or you can use paints or you can use pencils. Again, it gives it, whenever you see something on a black background, it's always such a stark contrast, but it's very cool. I just think it's great. And also, I think, this kind of coloring style really fills in a lot of detail. So it's also, I think, whatever style you like, whatever style you want to work with, right? All right. My gosh, we're totally running out of space. We'll be fine. In the home stretch of these makes, kinda, sorta. All right. This image, well, needs no introduction. This is Vicky. Again, look at that, where it just looks like it's stamped on a piece of sheet metal using metallics. I mean, she just has such a great approach to creating something very industrial. But I love how she did the flower, and you see that little sanding bits around it, where it just looks like it's done on a piece of metal. I also love the addition of the little tidbits on there. What a cool card, Vicky. See? So if you're like, oh, flowers aren't my jam, I'm not into color, I'm not into this, got you covered. It could be just such an industrial approach. Kathy created this. So when I was talking about journals, this is also a thing to remember when it comes to stamps. You can make something by hand. You can buy something, and I'm not sure if she made this or bought it. It really doesn't matter. You can take a structure and you can embellish it with your stamps. So here Kathy went in. There's Hodgepodge you can see in the back here. Then you can see just some rings, whether you're stamping with caps, different lids or jars. Then we've got that French Garden floral. Then we've got the typewriter key that you can, stamp that typewriter keyboard from Deconstructed and use a circle punch and punch out your own little typewriter keys. This looks like it was already done, I think, from something else. But I love the idea of really combining imagery for different things. Like I talked about, note cards, journals, cards. It's a tool. That's what it is. But I think seeing flowers on a more industrial side is also something that botanicals have a great look and aesthetic, from pretty to vintage to colorful to grunge. They really, they go everywhere. So yeah, pretty amazing. I mean, so many things that can be done with French Garden. You look at the flowers, like, flowers, I'm not into it. But then you see it, you're like, well, I can see they can be used a lot of different ways. Amazing, amazing, amazing. A little scratchy bit. I want walls like this. Not necessarily with the flowers, just metallic walls that are scratched up.
Ooh, we can
be
do
good.
that.
We can do that. Mario's like, let's do it.
Let's do this
Cool.
right.
I know. Aren't the makers so inspiring? I love all the comments that you guys share while we're doing lives for the makers that make, because they really do. They just try to put so much of themselves into these makes, and you know, they're not everyone's a card maker, not everyone is into vintage, not everyone's into flowers, but I really appreciate how the makers, you know, when we show them the stamps, they're like, okay, yeah, I'll do it. And they do them. It's great. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about Tidbits. Now, obviously, you've seen Tidbits on a lot of makes, and you're going to see some of it on these, but these are ones that I felt just maybe highlighted them a little different. They definitely use some of the other images, but you'll get my point in just a minute when I show you. So we'll start with these cards from Louisa, and you can see that, yes, these are the flowers that we just did in French Garden. I love how she went in, and I mean, that's some serious cutting. I know, like I said, I know that Simon Says Stamp is doing some coordinating dies for these. They do that for several of the stamps, but I just think it's really like that. But people find it therapeutic. I do find it fun. I really do. But if I did one, I don't think I would commit to 3. But nonetheless, absolutely beautiful how these flowers really accent the collage. But this is about Tidbits. This is where I really saw how Tidbits can be used in such a unique way. So you see how she took these little elements and stamped them on little bits of paper, cut them out. You can use a paper trimmer, you can use your scissors, and then just start overlapping them, weaving them, stamp them on different paper. You can do it on white cardstock, on craft, on vellum, on tissue. I love how she also incorporated the tiny attacher or the little sellotape. But see all of these little collage elements where you're like, oh, these are so cool, all these little tidbits. Yes, these are the numbers from Deconstructed. There's that little graph from Deconstructed, that little bus map that I talked about. But I just thought it was really great how we've got the flower from French Garden, the sentiments from Floristry, some elements from Deconstructed. So there's like that circular color wheel, and it could just be in the background. It's in the background because it's in the background. It doesn't have to be a focal point. But Tidbits, that's something where you're just going to sit down with this glorious stamp set, and you may just want to ink up the whole sheet and just stamp it on a piece of paper, and then just use your paper trimmer because they're linear, or use your scissors and cut up a whole bowl of Tidbits, and then you can ink them, and then you can layer them and glue them and stamp them. And that's the inspiration right there for, you know, like I said, even though they're florals, I really thought this is what Tidbits is all about. It's just about really essentially creating your own ephemera, your own little bits. Not that we don't want you to get the ideology stuff, but sometimes you just want it, and you want it in quantity, especially a certain number or a certain element. But it doesn't always have to be industrial. It really doesn't. I think that's important to remember. So Kath created these cards, and again, it's so interesting that they use the same stamp. It is a beautiful stamp. That's why I wanted to do it. I love that flower. But here Kath not only created some colorful elements, but used Tidbits as a background. So stamping it, embossing it in white over that inky background, and then die cutting it. And so I love that she took the panels from the die cut and used it on another card. So here we've got a little shakety shake because she stamped that background, did that embossing, die cut the little windows, made a shakety shake, but those little tiles, well, she made a second card out of it. Taking all of those little leftover pieces, gluing those down, a little ink splash on there, and then doing another stamp sentiment. So this is like that whole 2-for-1, but it's using the Tidbits. Maybe you don't want all those little embellishments. Maybe you're like, Tim, I'm a flat card maker. I don't want to have paper weaving and tiny attaching. Okay, it does make a very cool background because it is more linear than Hodgepodge, right? And it just has I think a cleaner approach. Kath also created these. I love that, where you've got the white embossing, black embossing, but a totally different vibe. So these, I'm guessing these are the tile dies. Maybe, I mean, they could be nested shapes, but they could also be the stacked tiles that I did with Sizzix for dies. But any die, any punch, I love the idea of doing a background and cutting that background in shape. We saw the card that Kathy did with the heart. I think what's really great about that is taking parts and pieces and just die cutting shapes out of them. So whether they're boxes or hexagons or anything, yeah, using stacked tiles for sure. Taking these little elements, it's really nice. And that's the other nice thing about those dies, is that you get 5 of the same size. So you could have a background, you can put all 5, probably here too, she put all 3. Like, you can lay it out and die cut it in one pass. That's what I like about that versus, say, nested dies, where nested dies you only get like 1 of each shape. That's what I liked about the tile dies that I did with Sizzix. But there again, you've got tidbits in the background. You can use accents. You can go in and stamp different sentiments. Man, when she makes cards, she sends us so many cards, Kath does. It's like they need to do one a piece, but when you love what you do, you just do it, right? That's the easy thing. So I think that's important. So Jen created this card. So again, I know that's embroidery. That's that flower there. There's a little background watercolor with Hodgepodge. But I like how Jen used these in pink, right? Use the tidbits where, yes, I mentioned they have like an industrial element, but stamped in pink, I can't really say they're industrial. I think they're great accents. So it's choosing little elements and adding that, and I think it really accents this card. It's got that cute, clean look to it, slightly vintage, but that to me is what's great, because, you know, Jen is she has that kind of crossover. She loves color, but she also likes to get her distress on so much. And so I think it's really the perfect pairing to show tidbits that they don't always have to be black and white or vintage. It just makes for a great card. It's one of the things that makes that stamp set so, I don't know, so important. Juliana created this. Again, I love the pairing of dies that she did with her cards. So you've got a big Sizzix gear, you've got a butterfly, a little ideology sticker, some thread. This is Hodgepodge, so you can see, you know, it's definitely got a lot of interest and intrigue. But in the back, there's so many different layers. You can see in the green, I'll highlight those. The green florals, that's French Garden. So those were those flowers that we just did. Then you can see here that you've got like the little map in the grid from Deconstructed. You've got the typewriter from Deconstructed. But you got the numbers from Deconstructed. But then to add another layer, you change colors, and then you add little tidbits, right? The fill in the blanks, where you stamp that number strip, you stamp that little post cancellation, you stamp a little identification. That's the joy of stamps. Stamps are tools. So you look at this, it's Hodgepodge, French Garden, Deconstructed, tidbits, just utilizing different elements. It's the power of a stamp. And I bet right now, Mr. Stampers Anonymous is just like grinning ear to ear going, say it again, say power of stamps, because it really is. It's so great. Kathy created this one. Again, very collage, very fun, and utilizing a lot of elements. So you've got the florals in there from French Garden, but I loved how she went in and stamped tidbits, and again, use a paper punch, use a cutter, and dimensionalize these as little embellishments. They can really be used however you choose to use it. I also love that it's on like a piece of corrugated cardboard, some little hardware heads. It's a great card. So something like this, again, could be a framed piece of art. It could be a journal cover. It could sit on an easel. I love the idea of just utilizing bits and pieces. And sometimes sets like this, especially when you look at a set like Tidbits, this is where, if those days that maybe you don't have any creativity in the tank, happens to all of us, right? Where the tank is just empty. Sit down and make some tidbits. Make a whole bowl of them. Maybe you're inking and stamping. Maybe you're doing different colors. Cut them out. Use paper punches, whatever it is. And then you've got this bowl or bag of embellishments when you need it. So I always think that's the importance of compartmental making, is you don't always have to make everything for the craft. You can just have little elements at the ready. Even if you're doing these tiles, I would stamp and die cut tiles like one day and just be done with that. I wouldn't even think what to put them on, because then you don't care about color and composition or any of that. You just kind of get out of your head. So inspiring makes, correct? I love that. So good. You'd think, what are you going to do with tidbits? Well, a lot. So, all right. Thanks, Mario.
You're welcome.
Really good. All right. So our next one we're going to talk about is A little Deconstructed. I love this set. You've seen it used a lot of different ways, and this is one that maybe people are like, I don't get it. I think it's really about looking at the elements. And I think the creative freedom I have when I'm designing stamps is that I can just find images that, you know, a lot of these came out of old books. Like I said, you know, this was more ephemera based than licensed art based, because I love to collect ephemera for ideology. But it's seeing the images of how they can be. And often people think that it has to be super industrial. Well, Sharon created this card. It is beautiful, colorful, whimsical, and it's using an element from Deconstructed, because like I said, I see this as a color wheel, but not your typical just triangular, circular one. This has just a different nuance to it, and that makes it fun. So you can still use this in watercolor. You can go in and add some little splatters. You can do your sewing around the edge. But I love that detail where you can take the watercolor pencils and you can do your sketching and then just pull in some of the color. You can add a little distress spritz to the top. It's a great card that Sharon did. But seeing that image, not industrial. And that's what you're going to see from the makes. They're not all industrial. Nico created this one, again, kind of taking that color wheel concept. He made this one where this one spins. So you can stamp and, you know, you can match that up to the wheel, or you can just spin it around. I think that's really cool, just to take an element and cut that out and use it on a card. You know me, I love interaction stuff. Spinners, little thingers, little wobbler things. Yeah, fun. But a great card, again, taking a little vintage approach to the background. You can see the subtlety back here, all those little images, those are Tidbits, just stamped in the same color that he blended the background with. But cool color wheel kind of look, right? Seeing those images. You can also get really vibrant. Kubert created this one. Look at that beautiful alcohol ink background. Ah, so beautiful, so fluid. I love it. It just almost has like just this galaxy kind of look. Then she stamped it directly on that. And you know, when you stamp on Yupo, it's tricky, you know. Sometimes it works great, sometimes not. But what I love about stamping on Yupo is it does become part of the background. So you can see here that imagery took on the part of the background. Then she went in and stamped it again on black, embossed it in white, cut it out as well. It doesn't spin, but she put a game spinner on there that does. And then taking that keyboard, stamp and emboss, use a circle punch, and she's got Happy B-Day. So making a birthday card out of that. So taking what you have and creating the way you would want to create with it. So you can go watercolor, you can go vibrant color, you can do a colorful background and use those elements still to create the way you would want to create. I think that's super important. Barbara created this one. So again, taking that colorful approach, doing a colorful background, doing the watercolor. So there's that stamp in Deconstructed. That's either the X or the plus. You've got the great numbers. Those just make those elements of this, and why we did that is it just adds little components that you can build, you can construct from Deconstructed. Then we've got that stamp in the center, and then same thing. She stamped, I mean, you can stamp that keyboard as many times, and you got a circle punch. It makes quick work out of all these little alphabet tiles. Remember the little type? People were sawing off typewriter keys just to use it. I think that's really very cool. So she's got choose happiness. So you see choose right here, and then you start here, choose happiness. Clever. And maybe some people will get the message and maybe some people don't ever see it, but I think it's still great to remember of how you can utilize the elements. Anita created this card. You don't always have to be colorful. You can still just appreciate the artistic styling of a design. So Anita created this background. Look at how sparkly that is. That's just a bunch of dots of stickles. Isn't that crazy? It looks like a million crystals are on it, but it's really, I mean, that's patience of this, like dot, 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 dot. So many. I love that. So cool. Then we've got the numbers here. So she's got numbers. Again, just stamp. I'm taken back by this. I wouldn't even have the patience for that, but I love it. It catches the light like diamonds, doesn't it? And then again, just taking that stamp, but I also love how she just highlighted those. So maybe it's a birthday card for 58th birthday or 85th. Could go either way, but I love that. Great use of that stamp again, birthday card, but just totally different, completely different way of how you want to create with it. Then there's makers that just wanted to use these elements just as part of the background. So Keisha created this card. Again, a great watercolor background. You can see how Sign Painter was used for Brave, but then using those elements from Deconstructed just more as background elements. So here you see that that wheel was used more of a focal point. This, of course, is just more of that great background. And I love how these images, it does allow it to kind of go off the edge, if you will. I'm going to put this one down here. There we go. I do like that. I've got to look at my composition. Jen created this. So again, that background, that Sign Painter, just done in a watercolory rainbow look, but then that creates a very cool graphic to a birthday. So see, simple yet so cool, because you can do watercolor with stamps. You don't even have to take them off of the sheet. That's just as a background. But then using that cool diagram, it does just give it a completely different look or a different vibe to a card, doesn't it? I love that, Jen. Pairing it with things you wouldn't expect. We've already seen Juliana did that in her last card. Well, she did it again, taking all those elements from Deconstructed. You can see the map. And the map really, that grid was super important. I wanted things circular, I wanted things linear, and that to me is what really creates some great aesthetics. But she's got that grid map, but then she also has that circle. You can see it going all the way around. Then she did the flower right there. That's stamped and cut twice, so the flower layer is separate from this layer. That's from French Garden, but it still even used a couple of elements from French Garden, then used that from Floristry, and then see that little typewriter thing right there? That's Tidbits. So a lot of stamps on the card. I mean, Juliana, it was like a game show for her. She's like, how many did I use? Ding! Maybe you ring a bell every time you get a stamp set. That's what I would do. I'm like, Mario's laughing because he knows it to be true. I like to turn things into a game. I'm like, stamp, ding, stamp, ding. I do like to ring a bell. Good. All right. Vicky created this. It's a great grungy approach to using Deconstructed, but it also pairs with a lot of stuff. So in the back, there's a little hodgepodge going on back there, but then those really strong focal elements, that's from Deconstructed, the numbers, but then you can take other images that you have. This was from Curiosity Shop that we did in our first release this year. That pointy finger, I would expect nothing less from Vicky. And then she's got some Ideology hardware heads, and then that is an old school Ideology type charm. I do love that with the circle and this side up. But it's really cool, and there's so much great texture, that background, embossing glaze, and then steel wool to kind of dull it down. It just gives it such good texture. A little shine, a little matte finish. So many ideas, right? My word, so many ideas. Zoe with a Y created this one from Deconstructed. Again, the background. See, I hope that this live really inspires you guys of what you can do with stamps. Really, that's what it's about. Because I know you can look at an image and be like, want, I don't really get it. But hopefully these, you still may not like it, but it gives you ideas of like, okay, I can see how those elements work in the background. See, don't overthink yourself. Now I just read it. Right on, Zoe. Using the leaves, using the keyboard, pairing it with some Ideology stickers, but just the numbers and the imagery of that set, it's just something that was compelling to me when I saw it, because I thought, you know what, I love all the, I don't know, just the whole features of it. Another card from Vicky. I love that. There's no doubt that this was one of the sets she really resonated with. Here you can see that circle in the background, but this is all done. She always just impresses me. Every time I see a card that she does like this, I always think, why don't I do more of that? This is all done with masking. So what's crazy about it, see how all these look like fussy cut and dimensional? It's all the same layer. It's all flat. This little piece right here is just sewn around, but it's also flat. So this whole card is one single piece of cardstock, but by masking, it just looks like it's cut and layered and cut and layered. Isn't that, like, anyone that's been stamping for years and you remember the first time like you made a mask, on a Post-it note, or you can use, Masking Magic, that the wonderful Gina K has that. Such a great product for masking as well if you haven't used it. But stamping and then you mask and then you peel it off, it creates such a cool aesthetic when you touch it, where you're like, wait a minute, isn't this arrow something? No. Cool card, Vicky. I love that. So I love the circle. I love the keyboard that goes across, the arrow this side up, the little X's, and then again using some tidbits. How cool is that, right? So cool. But then I mentioned about using different things, using some different elements, and Zoe Hillman created this one, and there's a lot of stamps on this. She even wrote them down on the back, so Thanks for that, Zoe. So this is Glitch, this blue kind of smudginess. Glitch is also a very cool industrial set that I did years back, but it's a great one. But this one, remember how Vicky used the pointy finger from Curiosity Shop? Well, Zoe used the typewriter from Curiosity Shop and the little letter that came out, and then used that keyboard stamp as a background. So repetition, stamp, stamp, stamp. It is great that it's big enough to create a background. Some people are like, you need to do a background stamp of a typewriter, keyboard. Nope, you just stamp it and you've got a background stamp. So how great is that? And I love how she paired it with the previous release with that typewriter, because I know it's a favorite of many of you. And then she stamped these elements. These are cut. I mean, look at that fussy cutting around that. Oh my gosh. Even this little thinger. Oh my word. Look at that. Woo-wee. Holy moly. Yeah. Yeah. Like, I know. It's like pork chop fingers. Just like, I love that. I love the, and this of course is a little, you can cut a little slit in there. There's some of the sellotape, the numbers from Deconstructed, and of course using Tidbits. So yeah, 4 different stamp sets, but very cool how that is approached and layered on that, isn't it? So let me just, I can spread this out a little bit more just to kind of show all the inspiration using Deconstructed. So see, you look at this set and you're like, oh, I envision like a warehouse district, or, you know, metal or rust, or it can be. And it can also be very, very colorful. So clean and simple to color. It's a great stamp set. I love Deconstructed. It's good. And I love how really the makers that utilize it just did it their way. It's so cool. All right, we're in the home stretch. We got one more set.
I can fill in for you.
Yeah, okay. Can you? Yeah.
No.
Yeah, no. All right, this last one we're going to talk about is Hodgepodge, and you've seen Hodgepodge using the makes so far during this live. These makes, like I said, highlight it, because what's very cool is when it comes to working with the images, and we're going to start out with a card that Zoe Hillman did, finish with Zoe Hillman, start with Zoe Hillman. When it comes to working with images, images are tools. I've said that throughout this entire thing. It's really about tools and how you interpret that. And these can be used many, many different ways. Hodgepodge, because it is one stamp, it is a great overall stamp. Because regardless of the card size that you're making, if you're doing tags or A2 or slimline, whatever, you can really pick an area that you stamp. My advice would be to just stamp it, and you can either stamp it from the block, you know, where actually just leave it on here, ink it, and actually stamp. Some people find it easier to ink it, lay the paper down, and do a brayer. I mean, however you want to utilize it, but you can also just roll across it for fill in the blanks. But here Zoe created a card and then just colored, just enjoyed the imagery, enjoyed the quirky weirdness, but then just went in and did all of her watercoloring. And I know that for people that love to color, it is a great image to color in. You may not think it when you see it. You may not think, well, you can't color with that. Of course you can. You can go in and you can highlight whatever elements inspire you and add color to it. It's just, that's what makes it such a great, it's such a great stamp. I mean, there's fish and horse. I mean, there's so many things in there. It's unbelievable. I couldn't pick. There were so many things. But you can also take this next card, Joy created, and you can stamp it, and then you can just choose elements, stamp them again. Yes, she fussy cut. Look at that little horse. And the butterfly, little collie dog, little bug. You can stamp a second time and then just cut out those images and color those and highlight those. So this could be a background, because it's such an interesting background, right? It's like if a newsprint, encyclopedia, ephemera all combined. It's got such cool things. But highlighting those elements, even if it's one, is a great way to use Hodgepodge as well. There's so many different, there's so many different ways that you can use this stamp. You can also create a background. Rochelle did this card where maybe you do your colors. Maybe this one blended, it's got spritz on it. Look at those beautiful colors of spritz. But you can do any kind of background that you want, and then just boom, stamp Hodgepodge, stamp a place, and just how it's positioned. So these are very similar, but see how like Rochelle just went a little bit over, and by doing that, well, now you can see more of the dog. You see less of something else. I think that's the other thing that's really great about this stamp, is that wherever it lands, you're going to get some other interesting elements out of the image. But you can also utilize the image as something that might catch your eye. So Tammy B created this card. I love these little cards, but here Hodgepodge is the background. But then because that little moth / butterfly caught her eye, she stamped that 3 more times, fussy cut those. Look at that. I mean, really getting their fussy cut on. And then use those as embellishments. So now you've got that element in the background, but you also can take any of those elements, just like Joy did, where you pick an element. Tammy used it just to create this wonderful little card. So you've got the background and the foreground image from the same thing. So I said, don't underestimate the power of the Podge. It's so cool. I absolutely love it. Vicky created this. So watercolory background. So you can do like a watercolory approach to it and then stamp it, dry it, and then just ink it and stamp it again. So that's really, really a cool way to use Hodgepodge. You can overlap it. You can get messy with it. You can get clean. It doesn't matter that his head's gone. Who cares? Nobody knows what that was anyway. It's just Hodgepodge. That's the beauty. A great, cool little card on that. We're gonna fill this in. Kath, yep, no surprise. 1, 2, 3, Kath. So I love Kath's approach to Hodgepodge. She went with a color palette. Then she was like, I'm not gonna just stick to one card size. I'm gonna do what I want to do. So we've got, you can do a round card. You can do tags. You can do mini cards. You can do tall cards. But I love how she did beautiful colors, the teals and the browns, stamped it, did a little texture paste on that, little shine, cut out some of these little elements and layered that, took I think there's a tiny type or tiny text, did that stamp on that card. Then she's got in the background again, that translucent, I love the transparent distress texture paste because it's like glossy accents or embossing glaze, like in a jar. You spread it on and when it dries, it's shiny and it works as a great resist. But I love how she stamped and then trapped it and then ink blended to kind of fill it in. Did some cutting, and you don't have to cut out every little element. Like look how Kath just like cut out a collage chunk. So you don't have to just cut out the moth or the dragonfly. Cut out whatever chunk inspires you and then lay it over that area. Very cool. And then kind of the reverse. Again, I love how she's got that color wheel stencil. You can see the Hodgepodge going through the back and then just these little elements that she put on there. Cool, right? Very inspiring. Yep, stamp. Ding. Yep. You guys think I'm kidding. There is literally a bell sitting on my table. Mario, you can ring it. I'm not kidding.
He does love bells.
I'm not kidding. This is the bell that sits on my table. It is old school, and it is like, it makes a good ding. So if you think I just make up stories, no, it is really my reality, which is very frightening.
It has to be old, though.
It has to be old. I love, it's an old hotel bell. You know, from the front desk, those are the best. Like those ring, and those ring loud. Yeah, see? You thought, oh, he's just saying it. Nope, he's living it. That's the problem. Anyone that knows me is like, if the story sounds crazy, it's probably true. That's the thing. All right. Anita created these. I love this idea. Again, we talked about doing cards or like a stationery set. So not only using it for the cards, but look how she used Hodgepodge. How great is this for envelopes? Oh my gosh. Because it's like old newsprint or gift wrap. So you can just take store-bought envelopes and just stamp it with Hodgepodge because it's big. So you just stamp it. And if you have to stamp it a second time, who cares? You can just create it. So you create the envelopes, but then I also love that she used it to create the cards. Stamped on craft in black, used a little Sizzix die cut just to highlight something. And then all she did was go in with white pen and color some little image. So he's still part of the background. It just adds a little white detail. She used some design tape, then a little bit, that's from Floristry, that's from Tidbits, stamped on labels. Isn't that cool? Just really fun. That little white pen makes a huge difference, especially adding that little frame just to highlight. So if you don't want to go in and cut out something, that's another way that you can highlight Hodgepodge, is just using a frame. It could be a die, it could be an embellishment, it could be whatever you want. But that with the envelopes, freaking cool, isn't it? It's so good. I love that. When I saw it, I'm like, I want a stationery set like that. I do. I want all those things of Hodgepodge. Juliana created this one. Look at how cool that is with just over an inky background with a little oxide. I also love that she used those same photo frames, but in a different way. Very grungy. There's those little butterflies. That's this side up from Deconstructed. But see how it's a background, but maybe you want it more for interest and kind of design texture with the embossing. Because this one is very detailed. So if you emboss, it is going to fill in the blanks a little bit unless you use fine detail. But it adds a great interest to the background, especially for something that is industrial. I think that's great. This is another card Rochelle did. Rochelle sent it. This was actually a personal card she sent to us. But Rochelle was she's like, oh, I was trying out a technique to see if it worked. I'm like, this card's freaking beautiful. So I love this card that, again, she did spritz, but take a look at she did some little glaze elements. So this is what I was saying, where you just go in with Hodgepodge and just add that. But I love how she did the stamping and did the embossing with distress embossing glaze and spritz. Isn't that cool? You got shine and shimmer all on the same thing. That's a beautiful one. So she sent us that one for the live, but I'm like, they're both going in because they're cool. They're both cool. See, I think sometimes, all creatives, right? I think that you have to be mindful that we are our worst critic. Judgy McJudge, that's what I say. Like in our brain, you're just judging everything, going, oh, that's not what I wanted it to be. It may not what you wanted it to be, because sometimes that is. We have this preconceived thing of how it should be, but the reality is how it comes out. You may not see it as amazing, but somebody will see it as amazing, and we did. So there you have it. So Cassie created this. I got to reveal a little bit more of it. You don't mind if I do that. We'll put this here. Look, I'm building this. Cassie created this. I love this resist that she did in the background with Hodgepodge. See what an interesting resist that is? So you resist lovers, this is very good to do embossed resist. Stamp it, emboss it either in clear or white. Maybe you can do some ironing to remove some of it, or maybe you leave some of it on there. But I love how she used Ideology Portrait, did some tinting, took a little Ideology paper and treated that like as collage, where you're really using that background just as an element of collage. So good, right? So many good pieces. Take a look at this if you think, oh, this is all so grungy. Fear not, Jen has you covered. Hodgepodge can also be fun and colorful and whimsical. Absolutely great. So take a look at how Jen stamped these in rainbow. So that just means when you take your Hodgepodge, you're just taking, whether you're using ink cubes, the mini distress or the easiest, and you just ink it. Ink it in rainbow order. If you don't want a harsh line, after you ink it, you can just take a tiny blending tool and pounce that seam, and that creates that transition when you stamp it. But I love how she went in and stamped on white cardstock, that wonderful rainbow background, and then just stamped some in gray, cut it out, and used them as embellishments. I love the little crown she put on him. And then, of course, using Sign Painter, stamping and cutting those out. She's got Hello Friend and Thanks So Much. So this is using Hodgepodge in a completely different aesthetic in a great colorful way. So there again, when you look at it and you're like, yeah, but I'm not that kind of maker, I'm not grungy, I like color. Well, it's still an image, it's a tool, it's however you want to do it. It's why I love the stamp set so much, because it's creative versatility at its finest. I do believe that. I think it just has so much versatility when you're using it as a tool. Also as an embellishment. So Stacy created this. This is an etc. tag and then another etc. tag on top of it. It's got just great tattered edges, little fabric. I love how Stacy does everything shabby in there. We've got an old little button or a little knob. There is die cut in there, little paper dolls, but it's the background. So this background that ties everything together that has nothing to do with stamps, right? Because we're talking dies, ideology. It does, because the stamp is the background. And the interesting part of Hodgepodge is that it can be messy, it could be vivid, but it adds that great kind of harmonious look to the background. That to me is what I absolutely love about working with the stamps. And that's just really cool. All right, we do have to do some covering up. It's like we gotta start moving in.
One little spot left.
Well, there you go. We've got one more make, and this make, I love that again. Zoe Hillman loves a pillow box, but I think it's great because she treats the pillow box, much like Anita did an envelope, where you can stamp your cardstock first, die cut it, create the little pillow box, add some string around it, but the charming part really is what's inside. So I'm just going to open the pillow box, and this is what I've been talking about for live. I was so happy that Zoe did this, because you have this little pillow box, but what a great thing to make a little set of cards for someone. So she used Hodgepodge, stamped Hodgepodge and then just chopped it up into 4 little cards. So the little envelopes, you can use the little chapter 3, the little postal die, so you can make your own little mini envelopes. And look at these charming little cards. These are all cards done on craft. This is craft heavy stock. But she just used the components of that image. So it's just cut apart. I'm sure there's a way that it matches up, but that's the cool thing about Hodgepodge, is that you can stamp a whole sheet, but when you cut it up, it is just, you put art in perspective. It just looks like, wow, how many stamps did you go in and have to, we talked about Vicky's card, that you had to mask and layer. You don't have to do that with Hodgepodge. It's already done. I did that for you digitally. I decided what is on the top, what is underneath, what's the reveal. But they're just so cool to create this. And if you're into like domino art, where you remember stamping on the back of dominoes or tiles or mixed media, that's really a great use for Hodgepodge as well. It could be a background, but it can also be the focal point of that. And I think making someone a little set of cards and envelopes, and what a great way to present it, put it in a pillow box. But who wouldn't want that? Because you're always looking for, like, you know, a little thank you note for someone. You don't need a big old card. That's enough. Little goes a long way. So just absolutely amazing. So many cute and clever ways to use, well, my favorite stamp ever, and that would be Hodgepodge. Absolutely love it. Thanks for letting me do this one, Ted. It's so good. He's like, that's a big old stamp. I'm like, yes, it is. And I love it. So there you go. Amazing, right?